The letter wasn't long. Jonathan had rewritten it twice before sealing the envelope. No emotions, no complaints, just a formal declaration that he was withdrawing from the homeowners association. Effective immediately, he slid it through the slot in the HOA office door and walked away without looking back. It should have been the end of it. But nothing ends quietly in a neighborhood where control means more than community. Jonathan had lived in that house for 12 years. He'd painted his shutters the right color, trimmed his hedges to code, paid every arbitrary fee without raising his voice. But over the past year, the rules had grown strange, inconsistent. One neighbor was fined for a bird feeder. Another had to take down a flag after someone claimed it disrupted the visual harmony of the street. It was petty, but he had played along until the improvement levy came. $4,000. No warning, no vote. Just a notice slipped under his door demanding payment for a sidewalk repaving project he hadn't approved and didn't need. When he questioned it, they cited bylaws he'd never seen. That night, he made his decision. The house was his. The land was his. The HOA could collapse without him, but someone wasn't ready to let go. The next morning, as Jonathan opened his front door to load groceries, she was already there. Karen stood at the bottom of his steps, arms folded, eyes sharp behind oversized sunglasses. Her clipboard was tucked under one arm, as if she'd rehearsed the moment in front of a mirror. She didn't greet him. "You can't just leave," she said. Jonathan didn't answer right away. He took a long look at her, the white cardigan, the manicured lawn behind her, the HOA badge pinned to her sweater like a sheriff's star. "I can," he said calmly, placing a bag in the hallway. "And I have." Karen stepped forward, holding out a printed packet. "There's a process. You're not following it." He didn't take the paper. "I'm not interested in more processes. This is private property, not a prison." Her nostrils flared at the word. She adjusted her sunglasses, clearly trying to find a response that didn't sound like panic. "You signed an agreement. That agreement is legally binding." "I signed a document under misrepresentation," Jonathan said, "and now I'm done. You're trespassing." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She looked over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to back her up, but the sidewalk was empty. Just the sound of wind brushing dry leaves against the curb. Without another word, Jonathan stepped back inside and shut the door. He watched her from behind the curtain. She didn't leave. Not for 15 minutes. She just stood there, staring at the house like it had betrayed her. That night, Jonathan's porch light flickered out. He checked the wiring, no issues. The bulb was shattered, not burned. In the grass beneath it, a shard gleamed under moonlight. He scanned the street. Karen's window was dark, but her blinds were tilted just enough to reveal a sliver of movement. The message had been sent. Jonathan didn't sleep well. He lay awake, thinking about the eyes behind that window. The neighborhood had changed. The quiet now felt hollow, fabricated, like a surface too clean to trust. And somewhere deep in that night, he realized something chilling. He wasn't just leaving the HOA, he was escaping something far more personal. By morning, Karen was already back. Jonathan noticed her car parked diagonally at the corner. 2 tires nudging the curb as though marking territory. She wasn't out walking her dog or chatting with neighbors, just sitting there, engine off, sunglasses on. He pulled his curtain back, no more than 2 inches, careful not to make sudden movement. But even then, her head turned. Their eyes didn't meet, but he felt the lock. It wasn't curiosity, it was surveillance. He tried to go about his morning, coffee calls, packing more boxes for the move ahead, but the feeling outside gnawed at him. Every time he passed the front window, she was still there, unmoving, patient, like a statue with breath, and always watching. Around noon, she was gone. No sound, no tires on gravel, just vanished. He breathed out, took the chance to step outside, stretch, clear the growing fog in his head. The air was still, too still. That's when he saw it, his trash bins dragged into the middle of the street. Toppled over like kicked furniture. He hadn't taken them out. They weren't scheduled for pickup until tomorrow. But there they were, lids thrown open, contents scattered like someone had rifled through them with purpose. He glanced up the street. No kids nearby. No neighbors in sight. But he could feel her again. He looked up. Karen stood in her upstairs window, arms behind her back. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She didn't even bother to pretend she wasn't watching. The curtain beside her swayed slightly, as if the room itself was breathing with anticipation. Jonathan collected the cans one by one, slowly, refusing to look back up. He wasn't going to perform for her. But inside, something darker stirred, not anger, not even fear. Something colder. Calculation. The next day, he installed 2 motion-triggered cameras, one above the garage, one angled toward the side gate. He didn't announce them, didn't tell a soul. But that night, the first camera lit up. At 3:17 a.m., a figure stepped into frame. Not fast, not hidden. Karen wore a white nightgown beneath an open robe. She stood at his side gate, staring at the camera for 12 full seconds before trying the handle. It was locked. She leaned in closer, examining the wood, the hinges, as if she were taking mental measurements. Then she turned and walked away, calmly, without a glance back. Jonathan replayed the footage 3 times before saving it to a secure drive. No confrontation. Not yet. She wasn't trying to break in. She was testing. The next morning, she didn't park across the street. She walked the sidewalk instead, passing by his house again and again. Slow and deliberate, as if mapping invisible lines in the pavement. At one point, she paused directly in front of his lawn and bent to pick up a leaf that had blown from his tree onto the community grass. She examined it, frowned, then dropped it into a plastic bag. Evidence of what? He couldn't imagine by now. He understood something vital. This wasn't about an HOA rule. Not anymore. This was about power, about someone who'd built their identity from authority and control. And now, with that power slipping, would rather go to war than let go. Jonathan sat on his porch. That evening, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside him. Karen passed by once more. Eyes forward. No words were spoken. But the message was louder than any law. You don't get to leave. Not unless she says so. 3 more days passed. Jonathan stopped counting them by the calendar, and instead by what he found each morning. His trash can unlatched. The corner of his mailbox slightly ajar, a sprinkler rotated toward his porch. Nothing damaging. Just off, like the neighborhood was being tilted a few degrees at a time, and only he was being nudged toward the edge. He kept quiet. He didn't report anything. He wanted her to think he was ignoring it all. But behind closed doors, Jonathan wasn't just packing. He was documenting. Each motion alert, every video clip, even the late-night click of her footsteps on the sidewalk, he stored them all. Her patterns, her movements, her pauses, her habits. She had become predictable. But it wasn't comfort he felt. It was anticipation. Something was coming. The moving truck arrived early Saturday morning. The driver, a young man with a relaxed smile, looked over the property and gave a nod. Shouldn't take more than a few hours, he said. Jonathan had hoped she'd sleep in. He'd prayed she wouldn't see the truck, but he knew better. At 9:22 a.m., Karen reappeared. No sunglasses this time, no clipboard, just a phone in her hand and a stillness in her face that set off alarms in Jonathan's gut. She didn't speak, didn't even approach. Instead, she walked to her own SUV parked at the curb and started it. A minute later, she drove it across the street and positioned it sideways, blocking his driveway entirely. The movers exchanged looks. Jonathan stepped outside, slowly, aware of how quiet the entire street had become. No lawnmowers, no wind, no doors opening. Just stillness and the low hum of her idling engine. He walked to the edge of his driveway and stood 10 feet from her window. She rolled it down with deliberate slowness. "I'm not letting you go until the board approves your release," she said. "You're not in compliance." Jonathan's voice was steady, but low. "Move your vehicle. There's a grievance in progress. If you leave with HOA-owned property, that's theft." He blinked once. "I own everything on this land." "Not according to the community bylaws." She lifted the phone. The screen was recording. She tilted it toward him like a weapon. "You're being documented." Jonathan didn't speak. He turned to the driver, signaled for him to stop unloading, then walked back to the porch. He sat down, calm, unbothered, as though this were just another part of the plan. Karen stayed in place. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The neighbors were watching behind curtains, half-cracked doors, garage windows. None of them said a word. Then, at 10:03 a.m., another car turned the corner. It was black, unmarked, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to announce anything. It rolled to a stop behind Karen's SUV. The driver door opened and Alex stepped out. Karen didn't recognize him at first. She rolled her window up halfway and glanced in her mirror. But Jonathan stood. Karen turned, and Alex walked slowly. directly toward her, posture firm. Expression unreadable. She lowered her window just as he reached her side. He leaned down slightly and said, "Is there a reason you're obstructing private property?" She blinked. "This is HOA jurisdiction. He's not authorized to." Alex didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something metallic. Karen's breath caught, and for the first time, she stopped recording. The badge gleamed, for less than a second, but its weight changed everything. Alex didn't wave it. He didn't raise his voice or announce his title. He simply held it at a comfortable angle, long enough for Karen to read the seal and the embedded ID. It wasn't just law enforcement. It was federal. She recognized the agency's name before her mouth could form a response. Her recording had stopped. Her hand lowered, and for the first time since Jonathan filed his withdrawal, she hesitated. "Is there a reason you're obstructing this vehicle's path?" Alex asked again, voice low but unyielding. Karen looked between the badge and his face, trying to recalibrate her tone. "This is an internal HOA matter. He's under administrative restriction." Jonathan watched from the porch. He didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. And what he saw wasn't fear on Karen's face. It was something worse. Disbelief. She didn't understand how things had escalated beyond her reach. Alex took one step closer. Close enough for his presence to settle like a weight across her shoulders. "You're blocking access to private property. You've positioned your vehicle in a manner that could be construed as unlawful detainment. I suggest you move your car now, before this turns into something that ends up on more than just a neighborhood blog." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. Her hand fumbled toward the gearshift. The SUV jolted into reverse, backing away from the driveway with uneven stops. Like a puppet with its strings cut loose. The neighbors still watched from behind their blinds. One garage door inched open and stopped. Jonathan saw a familiar face, peeking out, someone who used to chat with Karen every Tuesday morning during yard inspections. Not anymore. The SUV stopped at the far curb. Karen didn't get out. She sat there, engine running, door locked. The show was over, but she hadn't left the stage. Alex turned to Jonathan. "She won't do that again," he said. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "You think so?" Alex paused, glancing once toward her vehicle. "No, but now it's on record." They spoke nothing more about it. The movers resumed their work. Boxes were carried out, taped and labeled, furniture wrapped. The sound of normalcy returned to the street, but it rang different now, like a bell that had cracked under pressure but still echoed. From her car, Karen watched every piece being loaded into the truck like it was stolen. From her own home, her phone lay in her lap, screen dark. No more live stream. No more clipboard, just silence. That night, Jonathan reviewed the footage, the whole encounter, every word, every movement. He backed it up 3 times, saved it to separate drives. Not for court, not yet. For truth, because something deeper was unraveling. And it wasn't over. The next morning, his mailbox was open again. Nothing taken. But inside, folded neatly between 2 electric bills, was a typed notice. Motion filed. Pending board emergency hearing. Provisional hold on withdrawal accepted. You are subject to review. There was no signature, no letterhead. Just one line at the bottom. Filed by board member, K. Aldrich. Jonathan closed the mailbox slowly. The HOA wasn't done, but neither was he. Jonathan stared at the unsigned notice again that evening. The wording was deliberate, clean, but the format was wrong. It wasn't the HOA's standard template. It lacked their letterhead. There was no legal language, no reference code, no formal date stamp. Just typed words on thin paper, meant to look official, but hollow once examined closely. He read it twice more, then slipped it into a folder along with the rest of his documentation. He knew what this was. It wasn't a policy notice. It was a threat made to look like process, and it only made him more curious. The next morning, he made his move quietly, methodically. While the HOA played intimidation games, he began making calls, not to lawyers, not to the press, but to someone they wouldn't see coming. Within 2 days, a friend of Alex's, a compliance analyst with access to county-level public records, sent Jonathan a secured file. It contained transaction reports, reimbursement slips, and internal HOA budgets, most of which were never distributed to members. What he found was worse than he'd imagined. Thousands allocated to community events that no one recalled attending. Contractor payments to a landscaping company registered to Karen's brother-in-law. A consulting fee, paid monthly, to someone named K. Aldridge but listed under legal services. Though no law firm was involved, it was a paper trail of misuse, not explosive on its own, not yet, but damning when placed against the HOA's constant harassment and overreach. Jonathan didn't go public. He wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, he sent a single email to the HOA board's shared contact address. No accusations, no threats, just a subject line. Please review the attached. We both know this doesn't end well for anyone if it escalates. And attached to it every document he had. That same evening, something strange happened. Karen didn't patrol the street. Her SUV wasn't parked on the curb. Her blinds remained closed. And for the first time in weeks, her porch light stayed off. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was the HOA's official website. Quietly, with no announcement, the section listing current board members was taken down. In its place was a blank gray box that read, "Under administrative review." The following day, a plain white envelope was taped to Jonathan's front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a printed apology. No name, no signature, just one sentence. "You are free to proceed without interference. The board acknowledges your departure." It should have ended there. But that night, Alex noticed something odd. He had returned for a final check-in with his father, parked across the street. As he was locking his car, he spotted Karen standing in her side yard, not looking at Jonathan's house, not speaking, just holding something under her arm, a folder. When she saw Alex, she didn't flinch, didn't run. She held the folder tighter and turned to go back inside. Alex said nothing about it until hours later. Jonathan was quiet for a long time. Afterward, then he asked just one question. "Do you think this ends with her?" Alex didn't answer right away. "No," he said. "She's the symptom. But someone else was giving her permission." Jonathan didn't sleep that night, not because he was afraid, but because he was now certain. This wasn't about a neighborhood, this was about power, and someone had just realized he was no longer afraid of it. The envelope had ended the harassment, but Jonathan knew better than to mistake silence for surrender. Power doesn't vanish. It retracts, gathers, and waits for weakness. And what Jonathan had done, calmly, precisely, was strike a nerve deep beneath the surface of current petty theatrics. Because Karen wasn't working alone. She never had been. The following week, while unpacking files in his new home, Jonathan received a strange email. No name in the sender field. No greeting, just two things. A time-stamped screenshot of a board meeting agenda and an MP3 audio clip labeled Review Session, 11:17 p.m. The audio opened with static. Then hushed voices. Karen's voice was the first he recognized. Irritated, shaky, "He's not playing along anymore. He was supposed to pay, not investigate." Another voice followed, deeper, older. "He sent that email to the county. I saw the read receipt." A third voice, more cautious. "That wasn't supposed to go external." Then silence, then footsteps, then a click, as if someone had noticed they were being recorded. The file ended. Jonathan listened to it 3 times, then again with headphones. Each time, he heard it more clearly, not fear, not outrage, but panic. Controlled authority was slipping, and someone had left the door open. The next morning, a local resident, a quiet, older man named Elias, who rarely spoke to anyone, knocked on Jonathan's door. He held a coffee mug in one hand, a manila folder in the other. "I heard what happened," he said, voice low. "I've been waiting for someone to push back." Inside the folder were years of archived board decisions, copies of secret votes, budget drafts never circulated to residents, minutes from closed-door sessions that had resulted in arbitrary enforcement campaigns, including one marked with Jonathan's name, dated a week before his exit letter. "You're not the first they've tried to choke with red tape," Elias said, "but you're the first that made them scared." Jonathan scanned the papers. His name wasn't alone. At least 6 other residents had been flagged for non-compliance pressure. None of them lived in the neighborhood anymore. It hadn't been random, it had been deliberate. That afternoon, Jonathan drove to the county records office. With quiet efficiency, he filed a formal complaint, not as a victim, but as a former board member. Years earlier, for a brief term, he'd been listed on an advisory committee. He used that credential now, and what he filed wasn't just a complaint, it was a petition for oversight. 2 days later, county inspectors entered the HOA office unannounced. Files were seized, drives removed. No media coverage. Just a quiet administrative action, buried in the system, but the effect was instant. By the end of the week, 3 board members resigned. One cited family relocation. Another vanished without a statement. The third posted a cryptic message on the neighborhood forum. "I didn't sign up for this." Karen didn't resign, but her car disappeared from its usual spot. Her house went dark. Her porch light flickered erratically for 3 straight nights. Then, finally, the for sale sign appeared, handwritten and taped inside her front window. No realtor listed. No number provided. Just 2 words. Private sale. Jonathan stood on the sidewalk across the street. Arms folded. Watching it wasn't triumph, he felt it was confirmation. The HOA had built itself on quiet threats and unchallenged authority. But once exposed to light, shadows can't hold shape. And Karen, who once stood like a sentinel at the center of control, was now just another resident, hoping no one remembered her face. Karen had disappeared from view, but not from the story. Jonathan thought it was over. The board had crumbled. The silence had returned. His cameras now collected dust. But silence has a way of hiding cracks that widen when you're not looking. 3 weeks after the for sale sign appeared in Karen's window, Jonathan received a letter from a law firm bearing her name. This time it was official, not anonymous, not vague. Karen was suing him. The grounds: emotional distress, community disruption, and public defamation. She claimed his unlawful withdrawal caused damage to her reputation, loss of social standing, and trauma from public confrontation under duress. She'd even included a still image of Alex approaching her car, cropped carefully to hide the badge. It was a move Jonathan hadn't expected, not because it was bold, but because it was desperate. He didn't panic. He didn't call a lawyer right away. Instead, he quietly prepared, and when his court date arrived, he walked into that room not as a victim, but as someone who had been waiting for this moment. Karen was already seated when he entered. Her posture was sharp, her lips tight. She didn't look at him. The judge began by reading the complaint. It was long, overreaching, almost theatrical. Then came Jonathan's response. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. He asked the judge if video evidence could be admitted. The judge agreed. First came the footage of Karen blocking the driveway. Then the 3 a.m. attempt to enter his side yard. Then the audio clip from the secret board meeting. Each time a new piece played, Karen's expression twisted tighter. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering. Her hands began to tremble. Then Jonathan handed over the HOA financial records, marked with her approval signature, under a company name tied to her family. It wasn't just overreach now. It was misuse of power. The judge held up a hand. "I've seen enough," he said. "Ms. Aldrich, do you wish to proceed?" Karen stood for a moment. She didn't speak. Then she did something no one in the room expected. She laughed, soft at first, almost a cough, then louder. The kind of laugh that doesn't sound like humor, but like a string snapping. "I tried to help this community," she said aloud. "You think I did this for power? I did it because nobody else cared." He broke the order. He defied what we built. The room went quiet. The judge tapped his gavel once. "Case dismissed," he said. Karen blinked. "What? Your claim doesn't hold. The court finds no basis for defamation or distress. Mr. Hunter's actions were in line with his rights. Further, this court will allow his countersuit to proceed." She didn't move. Not until her lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Then, she walked out. Fast-clipped steps. Her heels echoed down the hall as if she couldn't get out fast enough. Jonathan remained seated. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just watched the courtroom door swing slowly shut behind her. That night, he returned home to find something pinned to his fence. A yellow flyer. HOA-style font. Printed carefully, but it wasn't from the association. You can remove names, but the structure remains. No signature. No contact. Just those words. And a faint watermark at the bottom. Not an HOA logo, but something different. A name he hadn't seen before. One he'd soon realize wasn't limited to his neighborhood. The yellow flyer stayed on Jonathan's fence 4 hours before he removed it. It wasn't taped, it was pinned, carefully and silently. Whoever placed it had done so without alerting the cameras. That alone told him one thing: Karen might have been the face, but someone else had been working in the shadows the entire time. He scanned the flyer again. The words were simple. Not a threat, not quite a warning. More like a reminder. You can remove names, but the structure remains. The watermark at the bottom was the only thing that stood out. It wasn't from the HOA. It wasn't legal or corporate. It was a single name, faintly embedded beneath the print. Colton Administrative Counsel. Jonathan had never heard of it. No one in the neighborhood had mentioned it, not during meetings, not in any paperwork. But something about it felt institutional. And old. He began digging. The Colton Administrative Council wasn't listed as an HOA, but as a management affiliate. According to property records, it had overseen the legal filings for over 30 communities across the state. It didn't appear in neighborhood welcome packets. It wasn't listed in contact info for any board, but it appeared faintly and repeatedly in county-level documents. On the signatures of zoning forms. On fund distribution ledgers. On obscure amendment filings, it was always present. Quietly, he followed the trail further, down into property tax adjustments and construction permit applications. Each time, the name surfaced like sediment stirred in deep water. Then he found something chilling. Karen had once served as a junior director on Colton's compliance committee, 5 years before she even moved into the neighborhood. This hadn't been coincidence. Karen hadn't just turned into a control-obsessed board member because of the HOA. She'd been placed. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. The house was safe. The property was his. No one had the authority to trespass now. But he realized something heavier than all the previous games and manipulations. He hadn't left the system. He'd stepped out of the spotlight, but the machinery that created people like Karen, that empowered boards to govern without oversight, that looped neighbors into silence, it was still humming. Somewhere just beyond the edge of paperwork and ordinary eyes. And he had touched it. 1 week later, a letter arrived, no envelope, just folded into his mailbox between 2 magazines. It contained no threats, no signatures, just 6 words, typed cleanly across the center. You were never supposed to leave. He stared at it for a long time. That evening, he walked his new property line. He checked his cameras. He checked the gates. But more than that, he checked himself, for fear, for hesitation. There was none. He placed the letter into a fireproof safe, along with every document, recording, and flyer he had collected. Then, he sat down at his desk and began drafting. Not another complaint, not another exit letter, but a statement. He was going public, not just with Karen, not just with the HOA, with everything, the councils, the affiliates, the manipulation behind neighborhood, civility, the illusion of choice, the comfort of belonging turned weapon. Because the truth wasn't about Karen's clipboard or a badge flashing in the sun. It was about what happens when those who are supposed to serve a community begin to believe they own it, and someone finally was willing to tear off the mask.